I woke up on my 80th birthday to complete silence, no phone calls, no cards in the mailbox, no flowers on my doorstep. Just me, my empty house, and the bitter realization that I'd become invisible to everyone who was supposed to love me. My children were too busy with their own lives, my grandchildren didn't even know my birthday, and my few remaining friends had either moved away or passed on. I'd spent 8 decades on this earth, raised 4 children, buried a husband, survived cancer twice, and somehow ended up completely alone on what should have been a celebration. But just when I thought I'd been forgotten by the entire world, a young woman knocked on my door with an envelope that contained a story I never knew existed, a truth that would unravel everything I believed about love, loss, and the invisible threads that connect us all. This is how I discovered that sometimes the most profound gifts come from strangers who see you when your own family has stopped looking. I raised 4 children after my husband Robert died of a heart attack when he was only 48. Sarah was 16, Michael was 14, Jennifer was 12, and little Thomas was barely 10. One day we were a complete family planning summer vacations and college funds, and the next day I was a widow trying to figure out how to hold everything together with a part-time secretary's salary and determination I didn't know I possessed. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. Days at the insurance office typing policies and filing claims, evenings cleaning the medical building downtown, weekends catering small parties when I could get the work. I bought generic everything, mended clothes until they fell apart, made meals from whatever was on sale. I never bought myself new clothes, never went on vacation, never spent money on anything that wasn't absolutely necessary for my children's survival and success. Sarah got her nursing degree, Michael became an engineer, Jennifer went into teaching, and Thomas joined the military and eventually became a successful contractor. They all found their paths, built their careers, started families of their own. I was so proud watching them flourish, watching them achieve things I'd only dreamed of, watching them become the kind of adults who made the world a little better just by being in it. But somewhere along the way, as their lives filled up with mortgages and promotions and soccer games and school events, I started becoming optional. Phone calls became shorter and less frequent. Visits turned into quick stops on the way to somewhere more important. Birthdays became acknowledgments rather than celebrations, a hurried card in the mail, a brief phone call squeezed between meetings, a promise to get together soon that never materialized. I understood, or at least I told myself I did. They were busy building the lives I'd sacrificed everything to make possible. They had spouses and children and careers that demanded their attention. I was supposed to be proud of their independence, grateful that they'd grown into self-sufficient adults who didn't need their mother hovering over them. But understanding didn't make the loneliness hurt any less. The isolation crept up gradually, like morning fog rolling in so slowly you don't notice until suddenly you can't see more than a few feet in any direction. First, weekly calls became monthly calls. Then monthly calls became holiday calls. Then holiday calls became birthday calls and Christmas cards. Eventually, even those started feeling like obligations they were checking off a list rather than genuine expressions of love. I tried to stay connected, tried to be the kind of mother who was involved but not intrusive, helpful but not demanding. I remembered every birthday, every anniversary, every grandchild's school play and graduation. I sent cards and gifts, offered babysitting when they needed it, provided emergency loans when times were tight. I was always available, always supportive, always ready to drop everything if they needed me. But reciprocity, I learned, is not a family obligation. Love given freely doesn't guarantee love returned. The children I'd poured my life into had grown up and moved on, and somehow I'd become a relic of their past rather than a presence in their future. My 80th birthday fell on a Tuesday in October, one of those crisp autumn days when the light slants golden through the windows and makes everything look like a painting. I'd been hoping that maybe this milestone would be different, that maybe reaching 80 would remind my children that their mother wouldn't be around forever, that maybe one of them would remember what day it was without being reminded. I woke up at 6 a.m. like I always did, made my coffee, and sat at the kitchen table waiting for the phone to ring. I waited through breakfast, waited through the morning news, waited through lunch. I checked my phone to make sure it was working, checked my mailbox 3 times to see if there were any cards I'd missed. Nothing. By afternoon, I'd given up pretending this was going to be anything other than another ordinary day. I made myself a sandwich, sat in Robert's old chair by the window, and tried to read a book. But the words kept swimming together, and I realized I was crying, not the dramatic sobbing you see in movies, but the quiet, steady tears of someone who's finally understood how alone they really are. That's when I heard the knock on my front door. I wasn't expecting anyone. The mailman had already come, and I hadn't ordered anything online. My neighbors were polite but distant, the kind of people who wave from their driveways but don't stop to chat. I wiped my eyes, smoothed my hair, and went to see who it was. Standing on my porch was a young woman I'd never seen before, maybe 30 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and kind eyes that reminded me of someone I couldn't quite place. She was holding a manila envelope and looked nervous, like she wasn't sure she was at the right address. "Are you Dorothy Chen?" she asked, and I nodded, surprised to hear my full name. Most people just called me Mrs. Chen or Dorothy, but she'd used both names like she'd been specifically looking for me. "My name is Lisa Martinez," she said. "I know this is going to sound strange, but I have something that belongs to you. Something my grandmother wanted you to have, but she passed away before she could give it to you herself." I stared at her, trying to place the name Martinez, trying to figure out how this young woman's grandmother could have had something of mine. But I couldn't make any connections, couldn't think of anyone I'd known by that name. "I'm sorry," I said, "but I think there might be some mistake. I don't know anyone named Martinez." Lisa smiled gently. "You knew her as Elena Vasquez. She cleaned houses in this neighborhood for about 20 years, until she got too sick to work anymore. She died 6 months ago, and when we were going through her things, we found this." She held up the manila envelope. "It has your name on it, and she left instructions that if anything happened to her, I should bring it to you personally." Elena. The name hit me like a physical blow, and suddenly I was transported back 15 years to a time I'd tried not to think about too often because it hurt too much to remember. Elena had been my housekeeper during the worst period of my life, when I was going through chemotherapy for breast cancer and could barely keep my eyes open, much less maintain a house. My children had hired her without consulting me, a well-meaning gesture that felt more like charity than love. I'd been embarrassed at first, having a stranger come into my home to clean up after me, but Elena had been so gentle, so unobtrusive, that I'd gradually started looking forward to her visits. She came twice a week for almost 2 years, and somehow during that time, she'd become more than just my housekeeper. She'd become my friend, my confidant, the person who listened to my fears about dying alone, who brought me homemade soup when I was too nauseous to eat, who sat with me during the worst of the treatments when my children were too busy or too uncomfortable to stay. Elena had been an undocumented immigrant, and she'd lived in constant fear of deportation. She'd left 2 children behind in Mexico when she came to the United States, hoping to make enough money to bring them over legally. She cleaned houses 6 days a week, sent most of her earnings back home, and lived in a tiny apartment with 3 other women, all of them chasing the same impossible dream of making a better life for their families. We used to talk for hours while she worked. She'd tell me about her children, how smart her daughter was, how much her son loved to draw. She'd show me pictures they'd sent, read me letters they'd written, share their report cards and school achievements with the same pride I'd once felt about my own children's accomplishments. I'd tried to help her navigate the immigration system, had even paid for a lawyer to look into her case. But the laws were complicated, the process was expensive, and Elena was always afraid that drawing too much attention to herself would make things worse rather than better. Then one day, she simply stopped coming. No phone call, no explanation, just an empty Tuesday where I waited for her familiar knock and it never came. I'd called the number she'd given me, but it was disconnected. I'd asked the other housekeepers in the neighborhood, but no one knew where she'd gone. She'd vanished from my life as suddenly as she'd entered it, leaving behind only the memory of someone who'd seen me at my weakest and loved me anyway. I'd always assumed she'd been deported, that the fear she'd lived with had finally become reality. I'd grieved for her, worried about her, wondered if she'd made it safely back to her children or if something worse had happened. But I'd never known for sure, and eventually, the wondering had become too painful to indulge. Now here was her granddaughter, standing on my porch with proof that Elena had survived, had lived, had remembered me even after all these years. "Please," Lisa said, "can I come in? There's a lot to explain, and I think you're going to want to sit down for this." I led her into my living room, offered her coffee that she politely declined, and sat across from her with the manila envelope between us like a bridge I was afraid to cross. My grandmother talked about you all the time, Lisa began. You were one of her favorite people in the world. She used to say that you were the first person in America who treated her like family instead of just hired help. I felt tears starting again. Elena was wonderful. She got me through the hardest time in my life. When she disappeared, I was heartbroken. I always wondered what happened to her. She was deported, Lisa said quietly. Immigration raided the apartment complex where she was living, and she got caught up in it. She was sent back to Mexico with nothing but the clothes she was wearing. My heart broke all over again, thinking of Elena being torn away from the life she'd been trying to build, forced to start over with nothing. But here's the thing, Lisa continued, she never forgot your kindness. The money you paid her during those 2 years, it wasn't just a job for her. You paid her more than anyone else, you treated her with respect, and when she got sick herself, you were the only employer who didn't just fire her. You kept paying her even when she couldn't work, remember? I remembered. Elena had caught pneumonia during flu season, and she'd been afraid to tell her other clients because she couldn't afford to lose the work. But she'd told me, and I'd insisted she stay home and rest. I'd continued paying her for 3 weeks while she recovered, not because I had to, but because it was the right thing to do. That money you paid her when she was sick, it changed everything for our family, Lisa said. She was able to send it to Mexico to help her children when her daughter needed emergency surgery. She used to say that you saved her daughter's life without even knowing it. I had not known. Elena had never told me about any medical emergency, had never explained why those payments had been so important. She'd just thanked me quietly and promised to make up the work when she felt better. When she got back to Mexico, she used everything she'd learned working in American houses to start her own cleaning business, Lisa continued. She was able to bring her children to live with her, help them finish school, even send my mother to nursing school. My grandmother built a whole life from what she learned working for families like yours. I'm so glad, I said, and I meant it. I always worried about her, always hoped she was okay. She was more than okay, Lisa said. She was happy. And she never stopped being grateful to the people who helped make that possible. She picked up the manila envelope. That's why she wanted you to have this. I opened the envelope with shaking hands and found myself looking at dozens of photographs. Pictures of Elena with her children, her grandchildren, her great-grandchildren. Pictures of graduations and weddings and birthday parties. Pictures of a life fully lived, surrounded by family, filled with joy, but there was more. Underneath the photos was a thick stack of letters, all addressed to me, all dated over the past 15 years. Letters Elena had written but never sent, letters that chronicled her life back in Mexico, her children's successes, her gratitude for the kindness I'd shown her during those 2 difficult years. I read letter after letter, each one a window into Elena's life after deportation. She wrote about her daughter becoming a nurse, her son becoming a teacher. She wrote about starting her business, buying a small house, watching her grandchildren grow up. She wrote about the American woman who had treated her with dignity when she needed it most, who had seen her as a person rather than just a pair of hands to clean with. In one letter, dated just 2 years ago, she wrote, "Dorothy, I think about you often, especially on your birthday. I remember you telling me it was October 15th, and I always say a prayer for you on that day. I hope your children are taking good care of you. I hope you know how much your kindness meant to a scared woman who was far from home and trying to survive. You were an angel to me, and I have never forgotten." I was sobbing by then, not the quiet tears of loneliness I'd been crying earlier, but the overwhelming emotion of discovering that I hadn't been forgotten, that my life had mattered to someone, that kindness I'd barely thought about had echoed through the years in ways I'd never imagined. "There's one more thing," Lisa said gently. She reached into the envelope and pulled out a smaller envelope with my name written on it in Elena's careful handwriting. She finished this letter just before she went into the hospital for the last time. She made me promise I'd deliver it personally. I opened the final letter with trembling hands and read Elena's last message to me. "My dear Dorothy, if you are reading this, it means I am gone but not forgotten, just like you are not forgotten even though we have been apart for so long. I wanted you to know that your kindness to me changed not just my life, but the lives of my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who will never be born. Because you saw me as human, because you treated me with love when I was afraid and alone, I was able to go home and build something beautiful. My granddaughter Lisa will give you this letter. She is a nurse, like my daughter, like me in some ways, someone who takes care of people. I have told her about you, about your kindness, about how you need someone to see you the way you saw me. She lives in your city now, and if you will let her, she would like to know you. Not because she owes you anything, but because family is not just about blood. Family is about choosing to love someone and refusing to let them face the world alone. Happy birthday, Dorothy. You gave me hope when I needed it most. Now I want to give you the gift of knowing that you mattered, that your life touched mine in ways that rippled through generations, that the love you showed a scared cleaning lady became love that built a dynasty of caring people. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. You are loved. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I could only sit there holding this letter from beyond the grave, this message from a woman I'd thought was lost forever. This proof that love never really disappears, it just changes form and travels further than we ever imagined. Lisa was crying too. Grandma made me promise that if you wanted, I would come see you regularly. Not as a caregiver or a visitor or someone doing charity work, but as family. She said you showed her what real family looks like, and she wanted to return the favor. I looked at this young woman, this stranger who had somehow become the answer to prayers I hadn't known I was praying. And I saw Elena's eyes, Elena's gentleness, Elena's gift for seeing what people needed most. I would like that very much, I managed to say. Lisa smiled. Good. Because I brought more than just letters. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small wrapped package. It's your birthday, and nobody should spend their birthday alone. Inside the package was a small photo album. The first page had a picture of Elena and me from 15 years ago. I didn't even remember it being taken, but there we were, both of us laughing about something, both of us looking happy despite everything we were going through. The rest of the album was empty, waiting to be filled. Grandma said every new friendship needs somewhere to keep its memories, Lisa explained. That night, Lisa stayed for dinner. We ordered Chinese takeout from the restaurant down the street, and she told me stories about Elena's life in Mexico, about the cleaning business that had grown into a small empire, about the family Elena had built from the foundation of dignity and respect she'd been shown by people like me. I told Lisa about my children, about the loneliness I'd been feeling, about the fear that I'd become invisible to everyone who mattered. She listened without judgment, without trying to fix anything, just accepting my pain the way her grandmother had accepted my fear during those chemo treatments. You know, Lisa said as we were cleaning up the dishes, Grandma used to say that families aren't just born, they're chosen. She chose you as family 15 years ago, and today I'm choosing you too, if you'll have me. I hugged this young woman who had appeared on my doorstep like an answer to a prayer I'd been too proud to voice, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, the warmth of being truly seen, truly valued, truly loved by someone who chose to love me not out of obligation but out of genuine care. That was 6 months ago. Lisa comes to see me every week now, sometimes twice a week. She brings her children, Elena's great-great-grandchildren, and they call me Abuela Dorothy, even though we share no blood, no history, no reason to be connected except the love of a woman who refused to let kindness die with her. My biological children still rarely call. They still forget my birthday, still treat our relationship like an item on their to-do lists that never quite gets checked off. But it doesn't hurt the same way anymore, because I've learned something important. Family isn't about what people owe you because of genetics or history or obligation. Family is about what people choose to give you because they see something in you worth loving. Lisa has become the daughter I needed, not the daughter I raised. Her children have become the grandchildren who actually know my birthday, who draw me pictures and save me artwork from school, who ask me to read them stories and teach them to bake cookies the way I used to with my own grandchildren before they grew too old to need me. Elena's gift wasn't just the letters or the photos or the final message from beyond the grave. Elena's gift was the reminder that love multiplies when you give it away, that kindness creates ripples that travel further than you ever imagined, that the connections that matter most are often the ones you never see coming. I still live in the same house, still wake up to the same silence, still go through the same routines. But I'm not alone anymore. I'm not forgotten. I'm not invisible. Because somewhere in Mexico, a woman I showed basic human decency to built a legacy of love that reached across borders and decades to find me when I needed it most. On my 81st birthday last month, my house was full of laughter and chaos and celebration. Not from my biological children, who still forgot what day it was, but from my chosen family, from Lisa and her husband and their children, from Elena's legacy of love made manifest in people who see me as precious rather than burdensome. We ate cake and opened presents and took pictures to fill the photo album Elena had started. And as I looked around at these faces that had become dear to me, these people who had chosen to include me in their lives, I thought about Elena and the invisible threads that connect us all. Sometimes the most profound love comes from unexpected places. Sometimes the family that saves you isn't the family that raised you. Sometimes a stranger knocks on your door with a message that changes everything. You are not alone, you are not forgotten, you are loved in ways you never knew existed. Elena saw me when my own family had stopped looking. Now her family sees me the same way, and I've learned that being seen, really seen, truly valued, genuinely loved is the greatest gift anyone can give or receive. My 80th birthday started with tears of loneliness and ended with tears of gratitude. It was the day I learned that love never really dies. It just finds new ways to reach us, new people to carry it forward, new opportunities to remind us that we matter more than we know. The young woman who knocked on my door that day didn't bring me a letter from the past. She brought me a future I'd thought was no longer possible, a future filled with chosen family, unexpected love, and the beautiful truth that kindness creates connections that transcend time, distance, and even death itself.